Alright, today I'm here doing a little bit of a digital graphic design, and this is an idea that I've been kind of like tossing around in my head for a while. I wanted to do something with circles, but I couldn't decide how I wanted the letters to look in the circles for a really long time, because I always, like always, I'm doing like a graffiti style with my letters thick. So I started off by kind of just drawing circles and then forming letters into that. And what you don't see in this is the couple hours I just spent on like a notepad drawing this out and trying to figure out what to do. But I think I landed on a cool concept after a long time. It kind of reminds me that, you know, even if an idea you have isn't super great in the beginning, or you don't think it'll be super good, just kind of set it to the side and come back to it periodically. And maybe you'll come up with something later when you find some new inspiration. But I spent a good portion of time taking the circle and making each letter in the circle. I kind of wanted it to have like the bubble appearance. I haven't done a simple bubble style in a while, so I wanted to just make something pleasant to look at, something nice. And I didn't have anything in mind for the color scheme at first, and then I also thought to myself that just circle letters would be kind of boring. So I figured I would make this a somewhat repeated pattern in the background and layer different colors on top of each other. You'll see in a little bit. You'll see in a little bit what I'm talking about. But, you know, as the not so great idea gains form and shape, you can start adding other things that you know will look good. And eventually a not a great idea will turn into a good idea. The only unfortunate thing I feel about my letters is that I have two C's right next to each other, so you have to, I guess you don't have to, but I really want to make them different from each other most of the time. And for something like this, that would be kind of difficult, especially with such a simplistic pattern. So I decided, you know what, the second one is just gonna be reversed. And I believe I got that as a suggestion from either a chatter or my friend or something like that. But you know, for the second C, I just flipped it around. Boom, different now. And then each one, I gave them each a color, but I kind of goofed. I wanted to keep a black line work layer version of each letter so that I could manipulate it a bunch of times and maybe do different colors for the same letter if I wanted to, but I forgot. So here I am kind of redoing a couple of the letters here, so that way I have a nice line work layer that I can duplicate and use a little bit more effectively. After I had finally started getting all the colors together, got all the colors nice and light. And also with a color design in particular, I always go for the lighter version of a color. I try to not have any black in it if I can, always on the lighter side. I don't know why, it just is more appealing to me, brighter letters. And here I am using a black line to kind of make sure that all these letters line up with each other. It would be a huge bummer if I made a grid pattern with circles and then the circles didn't line up at all, like they weren't even close. That would take forever to fix. So I figured I would try to do my best and get them lined up the first time and just make that easily repeatable. And this is the moment when I realized I didn't just want the rainbow letters. I wanted a cool kind of pattern style background to go with it. So I wanted to have the same letters in the background, but kind of like a different, more subtle and darker color idea. So that way I could have letters in the foreground and then something in the background that didn't mesh together super, or clash, I guess, super hard into each other. Which, you know, means I have to do the lining up of the letters again and kind of repeat the first process. But instead of coloring every letter different colors like I had originally, I make them all the same. And then I kind of repeat that down the line with yellow and blue. So I have like a full set of letters in red, yellow, and blue, each of the primary colors, and I figured that putting these next to each other would be a nice look. And also, I figured out that I wanted to layer these circles on top of each other in the background, not just line them up next to each other. And I wanted to see if the colors would kind of like layer on top of each other really nicely. And they kind of do. My original idea had them combine a little bit more cohesively into the secondary colors, but what happens here I think looks okay too. I kind of wanted them to be, I guess, more of a highlighter tone than I was actually doing here. I was trying to figure it out with actual like markers on paper before bringing it to the computer, so I was like physically putting yellow on top of blue and blue on top of yellow to see if I could find some hues that worked well together, and it did not translate digitally super well, but I think it was still a somewhat effective effect or method anyway. But it was a bit of a challenge trying to figure out what order to put everything in, and then what colors to pick here, how saturated I wanted them to be since they're going to be layered on top of each other. It was a bit of mental gymnastics, and then I was doing a lot of copying and pasting, which means I made some errors on the actual cropping of some of these selections, so I accidentally cut off like a small portion a couple times. I had to remake it or recrop and replace. I wanted to use a different software for this. I always use Autodesk Autodesk Sketchbook, and I pay for the Adobe suite of tools like Photoshop and InDesign and whatnot. So I figured I would try to use Illustrator or Fresco. But then I discovered that none of these three programs that I had between Sketchbook, Illustrator, and Fresco had the same tools in the same places, or even the same tools at all for a couple of them. For example, I like to do mandala drawings sometimes, and they have a repeated pattern around a center point. And if you are in Sketchbook, you need to click maybe 2 buttons. And then you have a really nice repeated kind of array where you can make lines. But I could not do that in any of the other ones. So I ended up coming back to Sketchbook because I knew where all the tools were a little bit better. They were in easier places to find, and it had all the tools I needed. And I spent a lot of time with this background trying to achieve what I initially thought I was going to get with the color scheme, kind of increasing the saturation, changing the contrast and the brightness, and just trying to make this look more like the colors were layering on top of each other nicely and working together to create the secondary, like, you know, yellow, blue makes green, so I wanted the intersections of blue and yellow to be a nicer green than they are. Like, it comes out greenish, but it's not you know, it's just not all the way, but that's fine. It still looks good. It's just not what I envisioned at first. But when is it ever, right? It's never really, it never turns out the way I think it will originally. Never. So I finally got the background looking kind of the way I wanted it. The saturation is nice. The colors do layer on top of each other kind of well. And I re-centered those first letters, put a little shadow behind them, and put that on top of the background image. And I was starting to feel pretty close to what I wanted as far as design goes here. I was a little bit bothered by the outlining on specifically the yellow letters because they seem to have like some weird blackish outline that was still on there. It wasn't too noticeable unless you got up close, so I decided to fix it a little bit and then ignore it basically after that. I ended up having to come back and finish this, not because I ran out of time, but like I kept telling myself I couldn't figure out what else to do with it, so I just basically, I knew it wasn't done, so I had to leave and come back and finish this. I ended up taking the background to a different editing software and changed it up and made it darker. And then I came back and I put some shading, highlights and shadows on each of the letters to make them pop out a little bit more. So that way it's just not, you know, 2D flat. If they're popping out of the page, they might as well pop, you know what I mean? Make it really nice. So, spending some time making the letters really clean. And then I'm practically done though after this. After I put the letters down on top of the background, I had like an overwhelming feeling of like, I'm pretty close to done. And then after that, I really struggled to find anything else that I felt like putting in. So essentially I was just making some final touches, giving some kind of like 3D optical effect to all the pieces. Kind of reminds me of like enamel pins or something. And then the last thing I did was I still thought that that darker background that I made was a little too dark. So I layered the original over it, put the opacity kind of low, kind of to about 1/3. So it not only kind of brought up the brightness, but it kind of like, I don't know, it made it look a little bit better. Anyway, here's the final shot. Thank you guys for watching my video. Please come through to my channel and check out the other artworks I've made. I also post them on TikTok in shorter version. Please come through to my Instagram where I post all of my artwork, and come through to my Redbubble page where I sell my designs as merch. Thank you very much. Have a good one. Bye-bye.